G7 summit, France condemns Trump fits of anger. Diplomacy cannot be dictated by fits of anger, French President Emmanuel Macron warned after a G7 summit in Canada ended in acrimony. In tweets, U.S. President Donald Trump described host Justin Trudeau as dishonest and weak and retracted his endorsement of the joint communiqué. That statement sought to overcome deep disagreements, notably over trade. Mr. Macron's office said France and other EU countries would maintain their support for the final G7 communiqué. "Let's be serious and worthy of our people. We make commitments and keep to them," a statement from the French presidency quoted by AFP news agency said. International cooperation cannot be dictated by fits of anger and throwaway remarks, it added. Germany also said it would abide by the communiqué. So how did the latest spat unfold? In recent weeks, trading partners of the U.S. have criticized new tariffs on steel and aluminium imports imposed by the Trump administration. Saturday's final communiqué aimed at easing those tensions by advocating a rules-based trading system. In a news conference after the summit, the Canadian leader reasserted his opposition to the U.S. tariffs, and vowed to press ahead with retaliatory moves on 1 July. "Canadians are polite and reasonable, but we will also not be pushed around," he said. Tweeting en route to his next summit in Singapore, Mr. Trump said he had instructed U.S. officials not to endorse the communiqué as we look at tariffs on automobiles. He said the move was based on Mr. Trudeau's false statements and the fact that Canada is charging massive tariffs to our U.S. farmers, workers and companies. Mr. Trudeau's office responded by saying the Prime Minister had said nothing he had not said before, both in public and in private conversations with Mr. Trump. Canada talks tough. Jessica Murphy, BBC News, Quebec. Until just a few weeks ago, the relationship between Mr. Trump and Mr. Trudeau could have been called cordial. Despite differences between the two countries over trade, over everything from lumber to the major renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, the two men tended to speak positively about each other. No longer, the recent U.S. decision to impose metals tariffs on Ontario, Canada, the EU, and Mexico was a turning point. Mr. Trudeau began using a much harsher tone. Polls indicate Canadians support the tougher stance. The fact remains that the two economies are deeply integrated, with jobs on both sides of the border counting on smooth trade. Whether or not this new phase in the Canada-US relationship will allow some of the trade sticking points to be resolved is still to be seen. Video.
He's my friend. Great relationship right from the beginning. Thank you. Right from the beginning. A special country, and you have a special president that I can tell you. Thank you very much.
What is in the joint communiqué? The G7 summit, held in L'Amalbaie, Quebec province, also covered such issues as relations with Russia. In the communiqué, the group of major industrial nations, Canada, the US, the UK, France, Italy, Japan and Germany, had initially agreed on the need for free, fair, and mutually beneficial trade and the importance of fighting protectionism. Other agreements reached include: What are the tariffs? On 1 June, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff for steel and 10% for aluminium on imports from the European Union, EU, Canada, and Mexico. Mr. Trump said the move would protect domestic producers that were vital to U.S. security. The EU then announced tariffs on U.S. goods ranging from Harley-Davidson motorcycles to bourbon. Canada and Mexico are also taking action in retaliation. What is the G7? It is an annual summit bringing together 7 major industrialized nations which represent more than 60% of global net worth between them. Economics tops the agenda, although the meetings now always branch off to cover major global issues. Russia was suspended from the group, then called the G8, in 2014 because of its annexation of Crimea from Ukraine. On Friday, Mr. Trump made a surprise call for Moscow to be readmitted, but German Chancellor Angela Merkel said other members were against the idea. The best way to get news on the go. Download the BBC News app.